This is an interview for the CJAM Oral History Project, celebrating 40 years of CJAM on the FM dial. This interview was recorded with Lyndon Way on July 5th, 2023 in the CJAM Small Recording Studio. Enjoy.
Okay.
All right. Hello, my name... Ooh, that is really loud. Hello, my name is Liv Patricia, and I am sitting here with Lyndon Way. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Lyndon Way. I used to work at CJAM from about 84 to about 87, and I did a whole bunch of things, lots of good things.
That is so cool. So where were you born and raised?
I was born in Windsor and raised in Windsor, but I've spent the past 40 years or so not in Windsor. At the moment, I'm in Liverpool.
What do you do in Liverpool?
I am a lecturer in communication studies at University of Liverpool.
That's so cool. Did you get your degree here in Windsor?
I got my BA here, and then I did an MA in Montreal, and then I went and did a PhD in Cardiff in the UK.
Oh, that is so cool. So it seems like you've been all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, on top of all that, I spent a good number of years in Turkey and then also in Cyprus. I was in the UK, then I wasn't. I went back to the UK. So, yeah, I've been around.
That is so cool. So you were a volunteer and then the news director at CJAM in the 80s. What specific years were you volunteering from?
I started university in 84. January 84, I remember, and I actually started at CJAM one day before I started university because I'd registered to come to university in January, and then I was sort of walking around, thinking, oh, this is cool, I'm going to be a student kind of thing, and I sort of stumbled across CJAM. And I think I met Pat Petro then. He was the music director at the time. This is how I remember it. I mean, it might not be 100% true, but this is how I remember it. And so anyway, we start talking sort of in the CJAM lounge, which I don't know if you have one here now, but we had one in the old part. And we started talking about music, and then I said, well, I want to do a show. And he said, well, you can start. How about now, kind of thing. And so I think now, this is like I said, how I remember. I'm sure I was on air within like 24 hours kind of thing. So even before I'd had my first class, I was in CJAM.
Was radio something you knew you wanted to be a part of going into university?
Yes, I think so. I think so. I'm not sure. I think when I started university, I only started university because I was seeing a girl who was going to university. I thought, oh, I should go to university. So I had no idea what I was going to do. But I think the first term I was part time, and I took, I took a business class, and I think I took a maths class, and I took a comm studies class, and I took a philosophy class, or something like that. And then, but by within a few weeks, I realized business was definitely not for me, and maths I wasn't interested in, and so yeah, it became philosophy, comm study kind of thing. That's what I ended up studying here.
Nice. So what was your first year at CJAM like? You said you got on the air in like 24 hours. What was your show like?
Something like that. I mean, that's how I remember it. Anyway, I did a number of things. I mean, there was a hardcore punk show called what JR used to do. I can't remember what it was called. Something Hour. Anyway, I would sometimes join them. And so I did that, but I had my own show, which was, I think, during the daytime, and so, and it was a bit sort of, those days it was quite sort of loose, and so I was just a general music show. I think my first year, that's what I did, and then the second year, I started this program called The Tunnel. I remember it was called The Tunnel because it was. It was showcasing Windsor and Detroit bands because I was in a couple of Windsor bands at the time, and so we were playing Detroit sometimes, and Detroit bands would play over here. So it was easy for me to sort of grab bands, and they would come into the tiny studio, like probably not much bigger than this studio, and we get a whole band in the studio, and when they might have a guitar, an acoustic guitar, and they'd sort of play live. I wish there were some recordings of that stuff. And if not, I'd interview them, and if nothing else. But so that's how it went. And then I think it was I can't quite remember. I think it was the second or the third year. I applied to be the news director, and my sort of platform, if you want, my sort of selling point was I said, I'm going to turn off the wire services. And so in those days, they were not on the computer, but actual paper things that would sort of chuck out rubbish nonstop. And so, so I turned them off, and Russ Wolski was the manager, and he was very accommodating. He said, okay, what do you want to do then? I said, give me anarchist magazines. We're going to read anarchist magazines over the news. And so this is kind of what we did for the year I was the news director.
And what sort of stuff did these anarchist magazines go over?
Do you know what? I have absolutely no idea. I can't remember a thing. I just, those days, like I was, really into animal rights at the time, anti-capitalists and all these sort of things, and so anything that was sort of challenging, I guess, the whole idea of CJAM at the time was sort of challenging sort of mainstream radio, and we were doing that, I think, really good in the music programming. But so I guess I wanted to take that into the news, and the content, God knows what it was, and I think we succeeded in that whole year. I'm sure when I stopped being the news director, somebody turned the wire machine back on, but and I'm sure you use it now. But yeah, it was a sort of a radical approach, just for, I don't know. Like I said, I thought the news needed to kind of go in that direction that year.
Mm-hmm. And do you still practice some of these, more leftist anarchist values?
Well, yes, I guess I do. I now, because I'm in academia, I write books and articles, and I've been accused of being sort of biased, and I say, yes, I am biased, and that's the point, I think in the social sciences we're all biased, so you might as well admit it, and sort of argue or talk about things from a certain perspective, but be open about your perspective. I think it's fair. So that's what I do. So yes, I guess I have carried over some of these ideas.
Cool, that is so cool. You mentioned you were a part of bands here in Windsor. What was that like?
I don't know what it's like now, but at that time there was a real sort of Windsor band scene, and it was integrated with Detroit, which is why this program, The Tunnel, kind of worked at the time. We had, I can't remember the names of any of the sort of places we played at. I just know there was a good number of places you could play at, and I was in a band called the Prehistoric Cave Strokers, and then there was another band called Daisy's Hot Butt Spots, and then another one called the Screaming Daisies. So these are the three bands I was in Windsor. And there would always, inevitably be some kind of gig thing happening where, if it was Lost Patrol or I remember that name, and a couple of any of the other bands, Nancy Drew's bands, whatever bands she was in, we'd say, oh, we've got a gig, and then two or three other bands would come and be the warm-up bands, and then CJAM put on a lot of things as well. I remember quite a few sort of CJAM affiliated gigs. I think one of the most memorable ones we had was Deja Voodoo. I don't know if you remember them from the 80s. They were sort of a pretty popular band from Montreal, and they had a record label which I can't remember the name of. Anyway, they were playing live in the pub, and it was going all out over CBC, all over Canada, and CJAM had something to do with it, and we were the backup band. And so that was kind of one of the big CJAM affiliated gigs. I'm 99% sure CJAM was involved in that. I'm sure they were.
That is so cool. What instrument did you play?
Bass. Not very well, but I played the bass.
And was music something that was really important in your childhood, growing up?
I think music's always been really important to me, which is what attracted me to CJAM at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. Definitely, coming to university, like I said, you kind of get attracted to things, even subconsciously sometimes. And like I said, it was walking around the student center at that time thinking, God, I hate this thing. Oh, but I like that. Oh, look at this. There's a radio station. Oh, listen to that cool music they're playing. So all of a sudden, you're hooked in. So yeah, I mean, and music even now. I mean, I still play music and different kinds of music now, but I'm still playing music.
What music?
Well, I have. You'll find when you get to my tender age that people don't really want you playing indie rock very much anymore, unless you're like somebody like Mick Jagger or something. So I tend to not. I don't play very much of that kind of stuff anymore. But I play bagpipes in a bagpipe band in Liverpool, and I play a Turkish instrument called a balama, which is a string instrument. It's kind of a just Turkish string instrument. That's what it is. So I mean, I'm still playing music.
That's so cool. So CJAM in the 80s, what was kind of the reception that like the student population had with the radio station that you might remember?
From my perspective, but I wasn't really involved in management at all. Russ Wolski, and Chris Burston would know a lot more about that kind of stuff because that's the stuff they were involved in. But from my perspective, I remember it was kind of like I think some people kind of resented the fact that they had to pay a wee bit of money to have the station up and running. But I think overall, for us as students, it was a great place to socialize. So, so the CJAM people that I knew back then, I still know. In my university experience, going through my BA in Windsor, the people that I'm still in touch with, people that I still, are from CJAM. And I remember, we would have the kind of baseball game, CJAM versus the Lance. Do you still have the Lance?
Yes, the Lance is still around.
Okay. So, and so there'd be that kind of thing, and I remember one of the flats we used to live in, out in Sandwich. It's like CJAMers would controlled about half of the flats, in the building, and some Lance people and some film studies people controlled the rest. So it was all good fun, you know what I mean? So, but in the wider population, I'm not 100% sure. But I mean, people would come up to you and go, oh, you work at CJAM, so people would know, because it was a big thing, wasn't it, when it became FM?
So you were living with a bunch of creative people in these flats, these apartments. What was that like, and how did that contribute to, I guess, your overall education and time at the school? Well,
I was just talking about this earlier today, and I think it made the university experience. University of Windsor is a pretty good university. I mean, it's not the best in the world. It's not the worst in the world. Windsor's you can say the same about Windsor. I mean, I know some people disagree and agree, but but going to University of Windsor, what made it for me was the bands and CJAM. That's what. Doing an MA afterwards in Montreal, I mean, I didn't have the same sort of fun experience. I worked in those radio stations as well, the ones on McGill and Concordia. I worked at 3 at one point over there, as well as a commercial station. But that's what made it fun, was CJAM and the bands, definitely.
So it would be fair to say that campus and community radio was a huge part of your life, especially in your younger years. Definitely.
Well, even still, if I hadn't done the CJAM gig, I wouldn't have then gone. I mean, I from there I worked at. I got a part-time gig working at CHYR. I don't know if it's still in existence in Leamington, and so I got. And then I started being doing some freelance work at CBC Radio here in Windsor. And then when I went off to do my master's, like I said, I was working at the 3 campus stations that were going at that time, and I worked at CJFM, I think it was, a commercial station. I worked there, and it just all sort of snowballed. Since then, I worked at CBC in London, England for 4 or 5 years, in the television and the radio department, and then like I said, I'm now a comms and media lecturer, in Liverpool, and part of the reason why I was able to get these sort of jobs was through was the start. Working at CJAM was the start of all that. And I just realized I also managed a radio station, commercial radio station in Cyprus for 4 years. But all this is all kind of my point is that working at campus station is great. It separates you from all the other kids who are taking comms and media, because there's like hundreds every year who take it, and there's not that many jobs. So working at the radio station is the thing that kind of separates you from the others. And if you like it, that's kind of, it's a launching pad, I guess. Not that I've ever thought of it as a launching pad.
But it's fun in the moment.
It is. It's fun at the moment, and I tell even my students now. I tell them. I say, the comms and media students that I do teach, I have 150 first years, every year. And I tell them, if you want to work in media, you better be doing something other than just listening to me waffle on for an hour at a time,
That is so cool. Before we wrap up, I was wondering if you had any sort of like special memories or stories that stand out from your experience here.
I don't know if I should say this one, but okay, I'll tell this one because it's so much fun, and we've since this happened, we have become good friends. Michael Stout, who I hope you interview in this thing, because he was quite a person at CJAM as well. He at the time was I can't remember what director he was at the time, but anyway, myself and a friend of mine who was also I don't know if I can say James. Myself and James, we had a night shift. We used to do the night shift on Thursdays, I think it was. And anyway, so we in those days we would probably leave the bar at 1 to come for the shift, and sometimes we'd bring in a few things which we probably shouldn't have brought in, and this one night it kind of spiraled out of control a bit, you could say, and and I think James ended up on the floor, and I was still talking in the microphone, but God knows what I was saying. And Michael Stout had heard this, and he thought, I better go and save CJAM's license. And so he was sort of knocking on the door, and I wouldn't let him in because of the state I was in. And then he phoned up the studio, and I put him live on air when he said, I'm not on air, am I? And I said, no, you're not. And of course he then told me off. And so this all went on air. And then he realized it, and he got incredibly angry. So anyway, so that's a maybe not a positive memory, but I mean, for me it's funny, but that was a good memory.
Well, it's just so much fun to be able to look back at them, especially because we have so many rules in place that those things are no-go these days.
Well, exactly. I guess if you want to edit that one out, another one is a more suitable one, maybe.
Okay.
You never know. You might need this one instead. Yes. So when I was doing the tunnel, Snakeout came, a band called Snakeout, who I was really close with. They recorded us in their studios, and we played with them and all these kind of things. And they came in, and they were a bit crazy and wild, and sort of that was their image, and they lived up to their image. So in our tiny studio, they came in, and I asked them, can you sing us a song? And they came up with a song which was full of sort of profanities, and it was live radio, so it went on air, but that was good fun.
That is fun. Well, thank you so much for making the time out of your day just to chat with me. Once again, this was Lyndon Way, and yeah, it is July 5th, 2003, and it is about 4:20